Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the new Dr. Fate and Master of Magic. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind on the rooftop was a liar. It whispered of freedom, of open skies and limitless possibility, a cruel counterpoint to the words that had just slammed the door on Izuku Midoriya's world. The metallic rattle of the chain-link fence was the only applause for the end of a dream that had burned in his heart for 14 years. It's not wrong to have a dream. Just make sure it's a realistic one. All Might's voice, the voice that had saved millions, the voice that had been the soundtrack to Izuku's entire existence, echoed in the hollow space where his hope used to be. It wasn't cruel. In fact, that was the worst part. It was kind. It was practical. It was a gentle hand guiding him off a cliff he'd been sprinting towards his entire life. He could still feel the phantom pressure of the hero's hand on his shoulder, a gesture meant to be comforting that felt like the final nail being hammered into his coffin. A four-letter word had killed him: can't. You can't be a hero without a quirk. His legs felt like lead as he trudged down the building's sterile stairwell, each step an echo of his failure. The concrete walls seemed to press in, suffocating him with the truth. He'd been a fool, a delusional, pathetic fanboy, scribbling in notebooks as if analyzing heroes would somehow magically grant him the power to be one. Bakugo had been right all along. He was just a useless Deku. When he emerged onto the bustling street, the city was a smear of color and a cacophony of noise that his brain refused to process. People bustled past, their faces a blur of purpose and direction. They were all going somewhere. He was going nowhere. His life's GPS had just announced. Destination unreachable. He began the long walk home, his path a meandering, aimless drift through the familiar streets of Muzudafu. He didn't notice the distant sirens, nor the faint tremor of explosions that vibrated through the soles of his worn red sneakers. He didn't see the crowds gathering a few blocks over, their phones held aloft to record the frantic efforts of heroes against the sludgy, writhing villain. He didn't know that his childhood friend, Katsuki Bakugo, was currently at the epicenter of that chaos, fighting for his life. The event that was meant to be the catalyst for his destiny was happening without him. Izuku Midoriya, for the first time in his life, wasn't running toward the danger. He was simply adrift in his own personal sea of despair, deaf and blind to the world of heroes he had worshipped moments before. His feet, seemingly with a will of their own, turned him off the main thoroughfare and into a narrow, winding alley he'd never seen before. The vibrant, chrome-and-glass modernity of the city fell away behind him like a dropped curtain. Here, the asphalt was cracked, with stubborn weeds pushing their way through. The buildings were older, their brickwork stained with the grime of decades. It felt like stepping back in time, into a pocket of the city that progress had forgotten. The alley opened into a small, quiet square, cobbled and uneven. In the center stood a gnarled old sakura tree, its branches bare against the graying sky. And tucked between a long-abandoned laundromat and a bricked-up warehouse was a shop. It wasn't like any shop he'd ever seen. The wood of its facade was a dark, almost black mahogany, unpainted and unadorned. The large display window was filled not with flashy products, but with shadows. A simple, elegant sign hung from a wrought iron bracket, with letters carved in a language he didn't recognize, though his mind somehow supplied the meaning: curiosities of the unseen world. A small bell, a real, physical bell, chimed softly as he pushed the heavy door open. The air inside was cool and still, thick with the scent of old paper, polished wood, and something else, something sharp and clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. Ozone. The shop was larger than it had any right to be. Shelves packed with leather-bound books, strange astrolabes, and glass cases containing objects that defied description stretched up into the shadowy ceiling. There were no price tags. There was no fluorescent lighting, only the soft, warm glow of a few strategically placed gas lamps that hissed with a gentle, rhythmic breath. The silence was absolute, a profound quiet that seemed to absorb the noise of the city outside, and the noise inside Izuku's own head. A shattered dream is a heavy burden to carry. The voice was soft, yet it carried the weight of ages. Izuku jumped, spinning around. Behind a massive oak counter, an old man was polishing a silver locket with a soft cloth. He hadn't been there a second ago. Izuku was sure of it. The man was ancient. His face was a road map of wrinkles, his back stooped. He wore simple, dark robes, and his long, white hair was tied back in a neat tail. But his eyes were a startlingly pale blue, and they didn't just look at Izuku, they looked through him. They were eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires, the birth of stars, the slow, grinding march of eons. I'm sorry, Izuku stammered, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I must have the wrong place. You were just walking. The old man finished, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. And your feet led you here. They often do, for those who are lost. He placed the locket down carefully. You are not in the wrong place, Izuku Midoriya. You are precisely where you are meant to be. Izuku's blood ran cold. How do you know my name? The shopkeeper offered a small, enigmatic smile. This shop has many secrets. Names are among the least of them. Tell me, boy, why do you grieve so? I can feel it coming off you in waves. A great despair, a great injustice. The old man's unnerving perception somehow broke through Izuku's shock, and the dam of his emotions burst. The words tumbled out, a torrent of pain, frustration, and 14 years of bottled-up desperation. He told him about being quirkless, about the bullying, about his unshakable dream of being a hero like All Might, a hero who saves people with a smile. And he told him about the rooftop, about the symbol of peace himself declaring that dream to be impossible. He expected pity, or perhaps condescension. Instead, the old man listened with a serene, patient intensity. When Izuku finally fell silent, his voice hoarse and his eyes stinging with unshed tears, the shopkeeper simply nodded. Quirks, he said, the word tasting like an unfamiliar delicacy on his tongue. A fascinating and dangerous mutation in the cosmic order, a sudden surge of power, gifted by chance, not by merit or understanding. It has made this world loud. Chaotically so. He gestured with a long, bony finger towards the back of the shop, where a single ray of dust-smoke-filled light from a high window illuminated a simple stone pedestal. You seek the power to be a hero. You have been told that power is a matter of genetics, of a lucky roll of the cosmic dice. That is a lie. Izuku followed his gaze. There, on the pedestal, sat a helmet. It was made of a seamless, burnished gold that seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. It was utterly featureless. There were no eye slits, no nose guard, no ornate engravings. It was a smooth, perfect ovoid of metal, an abstract representation of a helm more than a functional piece of armor. It was ancient and alien and, for some reason, the most compelling thing Izuku had ever seen. He felt an inexplicable pull, a hum that resonated not in his ears but in the marrow of his bones. It was a call, a whisper of potential, of power beyond his wildest comprehension. What is that? Izuku asked, his voice barely a whisper. That, the shopkeeper said, his pale eyes glinting, is true power. Not a quirk. Not a biological accident. It is an artifact of cosmic significance. A conduit for magic. A mantle of immense responsibility. He paused, his gaze intensifying. It has been dormant for a very long time, waiting. It cannot be taken by the greedy or the ambitious. It can only be claimed by one with a pure heart and an unyielding will to protect. Izuku stared, mesmerized. A pure heart? An unyielding will? All his life, those had been the very qualities everyone told him were worthless without a quirk to back them up. They were the punchlines to the joke of his existence. Why are you showing me this? Because the world is teetering on a precipice, young Midoriya. The old man said, his voice losing its gentle tone and taking on a grim finality. The chaos stirred by the advent of quirks has sent ripples throughout the fabric of reality. It is a dinner bell for entities you cannot imagine. Things from beyond the veil are beginning to peer in, drawn by the scent of instability. This world needs a guardian. An anchor of order. A champion of fate. He stepped out from behind the counter, his movements slow and deliberate. You asked All Might for a path. He, a being of immense physical power, could only see a physical path. He looked at your body and saw weakness. I look at your soul, and I see a fire that could burn brighter than any star. The shopkeeper came to a stop beside Izuku, his gaze fixed on the golden helm. The helm of Nabu does not grant a wish. It demands a sacrifice. It will give you the power to save everyone, but it will cost you the simple life you might have known. You will stand between your world and the howling abyss. You will bear the weight of all creation on your shoulders. He turned his ancient eyes back to Izuku. Your dream was not to be a hero. Your dream was to save people. The title was merely the vessel you understood. I am offering you a different vessel, a far more powerful one. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. This was insane. Magic? Cosmic entities? It sounded like something out of a comic book, a far more fantastical one than the hero comics he read, and yet, the pull from the helmet was undeniable. The sincerity in the old man's eyes was absolute. And what did he have to lose? His dream was already dead. His future was a blank gray canvas. This was a spark in the darkness. A terrifying, incomprehensible, but undeniably real spark. What do I have to do? He asked, his voice trembling but firm. The shopkeeper's smile was small, but it reached his ancient eyes. Choose. Slowly, as if in a trance, Izuku walked towards the pedestal. The air grew thick and heavy, crackling with a static charge. The golden surface of the helmet seemed to swirl, liquid and yet solid. He could feel the weight of its history, the eons it had spent waiting. His hand, scarred and trembling, reached out. His mind screamed at him to stop, that this was madness. But his heart, the foolish, stubborn heart of a hero wannabe, urged him on. For the chance, however slim, to make a difference. To save someone. To be more than useless. The moment his fingertips brushed against the cool, smooth metal, the world ended. It didn't end in fire or darkness. It simply dissolved. The dusty antique shop vanished. The city of Muzurifa vanished. The planet, the sun, the galaxy, all of it was stripped away in an instant, leaving Izuku's consciousness floating in an infinite, silent void. And then came the flood. It was not a flood of water, but of pure, undiluted information. 1 billion years of knowledge, 100 billion souls worth of experience, poured into his 14-year-old mind. He witnessed the birth of the universe, not as a silent explosion, but as a deafening chord of cosmic music that vibrated through his very being. He saw galaxies spiral into existence, stars ignite, burn for millennia, and die in spectacular, silent supernovas. He learned the true names of celestial bodies, the mathematical equations that governed reality, the language of light and gravity. He saw the war, an eternal, grinding conflict that predated time itself. On one side, a force of brilliant, unyielding gold, the stark, beautiful, and sometimes merciless logic of order. On the other, a screaming, entropic maelstrom of violent purples and sickening greens, the formless, senseless, and endlessly hungry maw of chaos. He saw civilizations rise on 1 million worlds, only to be consumed by this cosmic struggle. He felt their joy, their love, their terror, and their final, agonizing moments. He learned every language ever spoken, every spell ever cast, every scientific principle ever discovered. His brain, his very soul, was being rewritten, expanded, stretched to a breaking point. The pain was unimaginable. A psychic agony that dwarfed any physical sensation. It was the pain of a single drop of water trying to contain the entire ocean. He felt his identity, the small, fragile thing that was Izuku Midoriya, begin to fray and disintegrate under the colossal weight of it all. He was nothing. A speck of dust. An insignificant mote in a cosmos vast beyond comprehension. He was about to break, to dissolve into the torrent of information and cease to be. But then, a single thought, the bedrock of his entire being, held firm. I want to save people. It was a ridiculously small and simple thought in the face of such cosmic grandeur, but it was his. It was the anchor that stopped him from being swept away, and in that moment of clarity, a voice cut through the storm. It was not a voice he heard with his ears, but one that imprinted itself directly onto his consciousness. It was calm, impossibly ancient, and resonated with the power of 1,000 suns and the stillness of absolute zero. I have seen your heart, child of Earth. I have weighed your will. The torrent of information receded, not vanishing, but coalescing, organizing itself into a library the size of his mind. The raw, screaming chaos of the vision solidified. You ache to bring order to the chaos of your world. You yearn to protect the innocent from the jaws of entropy. Your spirit, though untested, is pure. You are worthy. A new sensation flooded him, power. Not the kinetic energy of a quirk, but the fundamental power to impose one's will upon reality. The power to mend, to create, to shield, to bind. I am Nabu. I am a lord of order. And you, Izuku Midoriya, shall be my agent. The void around him was replaced by the image of the golden helmet, now glowing with an internal, blinding light. It lowered itself towards him, not onto a physical head, but onto the very concept of his being. You shall be the guardian. You shall be the anchor. You shall be fate. The world snapped back into place. Izuku was on his knees in the antique shop. The dusty air, the smell of old paper, the hissing gas lamps, it was all back. He was gasping for breath, his body drenched in a cold sweat, his muscles screaming as if he'd run 1,000 marathons. The helmet was no longer on the pedestal. It was clutched in his hands, feeling impossibly heavy, impossibly real. The old shopkeeper was gone. The entire shop, in fact, seemed dimmer, more mundane, as if a light had been switched off. His mind was a maelstrom of leftover cosmic echoes and the terrified thoughts of a 14-year-old boy. He looked at the helmet in his hands. It felt familiar. A part of him, acting on an instinct he didn't know he possessed, he lifted it. It felt right. He put on the helmet. For a breathtaking, silent second, he felt it. The universe opened up to him like a book. He could feel the spin of the earth, the subtle gravitational pull of the moon, the life force of every person in the city, the chaotic tear in reality where the sludge villain was still struggling, and the apathetic stare of a dark, formless god from a dimension away. An ethereal, glowing ank of golden light blazed into existence on his chest, visible through his school uniform. He was everything. He was a hero, and then the sheer psychic overload, the aftershock of containing infinity, hit him all at once. His vision tunneled. The strength fled his limbs. Izuku Midoriya, the new master of magic, collapsed onto the dusty floor of the forgotten shop, and knew no more. Izuku's first sensation was the familiar, lumpy texture of his All Might-themed duvet cover against his cheek. The second was the rhythmic chirping of early morning birds outside his window. Everything was achingly, blessedly normal. A dull throb pulsed behind his eyes, the ghost of a migraine, but otherwise he felt fine. He sat up with a groan, his muscles protesting as if he'd been through the most strenuous workout of his life. His room was just as he'd left it. Posters of his hero, in all his smiling, primary-colored glory, adorned the walls. Figurines stood in heroic poses on his shelves. His desk was a familiar mess of notebooks and scattered pencils. It had to have been a dream, a horrible, vivid, stress-induced nightmare brought on by the worst day of his life. The rooftop, the rejection, his mind must have concocted the rest. The dusty shop, the cryptic old man, the universe pouring itself into his brain. It was the only logical explanation. A defense mechanism. A fantasy of power conjured by a powerless boy. He swung his legs out of bed, a wave of relief washing over him. It was just a dream. He was still quirkless. Still useless. The relief soured into the familiar taste of despair. He ran a hand through his messy green hair and sighed. Another day of being Deku. Then he saw it. Sitting on his nightstand, beside his alarm clock and a glass of water, was the helmet. It wasn't a dream. It was a solid, physical object in his room, an impossible intruder in his sanctuary of hero worship. The burnished gold seemed to absorb the gentle morning light, giving it a flat, unnerving quality. It was featureless, silent, and utterly alien. Izuku stared, his breath catching in his throat. His heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of terror and awe. How did he get home? He remembered collapsing, the weight of 1 billion years crushing him. Had the old man brought him here? He scrambled out of bed and checked the door. Locked from the inside, the window was shut. There was no logical way for him to have returned to his room, let alone for the helmet to have come with him. Hesitantly, as one might approach a sleeping predator, he reached out a trembling hand. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. What was this thing? Was it truly magic? What did it want from him? The moment his fingers brushed against the cool metal, the voice returned. It wasn't a sound that traveled through the air, but a thought that blossomed fully formed in the center of his consciousness. It was as calm and vast as a star-filled night sky. It was not a dream, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku snatched his hand back as if burned, stumbling backward until he hit his desk, sending notebooks skittering to the floor. He clamped his hands over his ears, a useless, reflexive gesture. Who's there? Who are you? He whispered to the empty room, his voice shaking. I am within the artifact. And now, I am within your mind. We are connected. I am Nabu. Izuku's eyes darted around the room, searching for a hidden speaker, a psychic quirk user, anything to explain this. There was nothing, just him, his all-might merchandise, and the golden helmet that was now the source of all his fear. Nabu! He breathed, the name feeling strange and ancient on his tongue. You're the voice from the vision. I am the architect of the vision. It was necessary for you to understand the scope of the reality you now inhabit. A summary, if you will, of the stakes. A summary? That cataclysmic, soul-shredding experience was a summary? Izuku felt a fresh wave of dizziness. He slid down to the floor, leaning against his desk for support. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice small. As I stated, you are to be my agent. My host. The human anchor for the power of Dr. Fate. Together, we are a composite being, tasked with a singular, vital purpose, to defend the structural integrity of this reality against the forces of chaos. Izuku shook his head, trying to clear it. Forces of chaos? Dr. Fate? This is too much. I'm just a kid. I'm quirkless. I'm nobody. There was a pause in the mental transmission, a space so profound it felt like the universe was holding its breath. When Nabu spoke again, his tone was unchanged, still radiating that unnerving, ancient calm. Your biological potential, or lack thereof, is irrelevant. It is your will that was chosen. Your unwavering, illogical, and deeply ingrained drive to impose a protective order upon the world around you. You call it saving people. I call it a fundamental alignment with my own purpose. The helm is the conduit for my power. You, Izuku Midoriya, are the key that turns the ignition. The logic was cold and alien, but Izuku could almost grasp it. Nabu wasn't looking for a strong body. He was looking for a compatible mind. And these forces of chaos? Chaos is the cosmic counterpart to order. It is entropy, randomness, decay, and change without purpose. Order is structure, law, physics, and existence with meaning. For eons, a delicate balance has been maintained. But this world, your world, has become a problem. Nabu's mental voice seemed to focus, showing Izuku images in his mind's eye, not a flood like before, but a controlled stream of information. He saw the double helix of DNA, then saw it warp and twist, sprouting strange new energies. The emergence of quirks was a chaotic event of unprecedented scale. A random, haphazard injection of reality-bending abilities into the hands of a species not prepared for them. Every time a new quirk is born, every time one is used, it sends ripples through the fabric of magic. It weakens the walls between dimensions. Your planet now hums with a chaotic energy that acts as a beacon, a lighthouse in the cosmic dark, attracting predators that feed on instability. Villains? Izuku asked. Villains are a symptom. A predictable, manageable outbreak of human chaos. I speak of older, hungrier things. Beings of pure chaos. Cosmic parasites. Ancient, malevolent sorceries. They see your world as an untended garden, ripe for the plucking. The pro-heroes you idolize are gardeners trying to pull weeds while a hurricane approaches. They are utterly, hopelessly outmatched. The weight of it all pressed down on Izuku. He wasn't just being asked to be a hero. He was being told he was the planet's last line of defense against everything. He scrambled for his notebook, his hands shaking so much he could barely hold the pencil. It was his coping mechanism, the only way he knew how to process overwhelming information. He started a new page, instinctively titling it, Helm of Nabu Analysis. Source, Lord of Order named Nabu. Power, magic. Not a quirk. Manipulates reality? Purpose, maintain order. Fight chaos. Problem: quirks are destabilizing reality, attracting cosmic threats. He looked at his pathetic, trembling handwriting. It seemed so small compared to the concepts it was trying to contain. So, what now? He asked the helmet. Do I just wait for the world to end? We act. The response was immediate, sharp, and devoid of any hesitation. Order is not a passive state. It must be maintained. And there is a dissonant chord in the symphony of your city, a minor one, but festering. It requires your attention. Izuku felt a strange sensation, like a tuning fork vibrating in his skull. Nabu was directing his senses, focusing them. He could suddenly perceive a knot of something, a few kilometers away. It felt like spoiled food, like the cloying sweetness of rot. It was a nexus of negative emotion, grief, fear, despair, all tangled together and feeding on itself, a grief catalyst. A low-level psychic entity drawn to a site of tragedy. It is feeding on the lingering emotional residue and amplifying it, causing incidents. You would call it a curse. I call it an imbalance that must be corrected. Izuku's blood ran cold. Incidents? People could be getting hurt. That is the nature of chaos. The simple, factual statement galvanized Izuku more than any rousing speech could have. This was it. Not a test, not a drill. A real threat. People were in danger. The dream he thought was dead, the core of his being, roared back to life. I have to go. He shot to his feet, his earlier fear replaced by a nervous, frantic energy. He threw on his school uniform. It was all he had, and grabbed his yellow backpack. He paused, looking at the helmet. I have to wear you. I am the weapon. You are the hand that wields it. We must be one to act. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Izuku lifted the helm of Nabu. It felt impossibly heavy, a weight of both metal and responsibility. He closed his eyes, braced himself, and lowered it over his head. The world did not dissolve this time. Instead, it sharpened. The colors of his room became impossibly vibrant. He could hear the frantic heartbeat of a mouse in the walls, the whisper of the wind against the glass, the distant rumble of the subway deep underground. His mind, connected to Nabu's, became a supercomputer, processing terabytes of sensory data every second. He felt a surge of raw power, a thrumming energy that started in his chest and spread to every cell in his body. A familiar golden ink blazed into existence on his uniform, an emblem of his new station. He could feel the grief spirit with perfect clarity now. It was centered on a busy intersection downtown. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he could be there in an instant. All he had to do was bend space, fold it like a piece of paper, and step through. Easy, a part of his mind, Nabu's part, thought. Simple application of spatial transposition. But another part, the Izuku part, screamed in protest. I can't just teleport. What would my mom think if I vanished from my room? I have to get there normally. Your adherence to mundane social convention is inefficient. It's not inefficient, it's being a person. Izuku argued back in the chaotic space of their shared mind. He won the argument by sheer stubbornness, grabbing his backpack and clattering down the stairs, much to his mother's confusion. Izuku? You're up early! And what is that on your head? Inko Midoriya asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of concern and bewilderment. It's a project, he stammered, his voice slightly muffled by the helmet. For school. A full-head safety helmet. For hero analysis. Super important. Gotta go, bye. He bolted out the door before she could ask any more questions, his heart pounding with the ridiculousness of the lie. The scene at the intersection was one of controlled chaos. Police had cordoned off the area, and several pro-heroes were already on site. Izuku recognized Kamui Woods and the rookie hero Empty Lady. A multi-car pileup clogged the center of the road, and paramedics were carefully loading a few injured civilians into an ambulance. From the edge of the police line, Izuku watched, his enhanced senses giving him a far clearer picture than anyone else. The pro-heroes were treating it like a villain attack with an invisibility quirk. Kamui was using his lacquer chain prison to secure loose vehicles, while Empty Lady, at her normal size, was helping direct traffic and keep the crowds back. They were competent, efficient, and completely missing the point. Through the helmet, Izuku could see the real culprit. It wasn't a villain. It was a shimmering, vaguely humanoid distortion in the air, clinging to a traffic light pole like a leech. It was gray and smoky, with no discernible features, but it radiated a palpable aura of misery that was as cold as a tombstone. As he watched, it pulsed, and a wave of psychic despair washed over the intersection. A police officer suddenly stumbled, his face ashen. A news reporter's voice cracked with emotion. The very air seemed to grow heavier. The entity is feeding, Naba stated coolly in his mind. It amplifies sorrow to create more of its sustenance. The initial accident was likely its genesis, and now it perpetuates the cycle. The heroes are treating the symptoms. We must excise the disease. What do we do? Izuku thought, his hands clenching into fists. The most efficient solution is to unmake it. A simple spell of molecular dispersal. It will be painless and instantaneous. Izuku flinched. Unmake it? He could feel the creature's nature. It wasn't evil. It was just sad. It was a living monument to pain. Killing it felt wrong, like stomping on a gravestone. No. There has to be another way. A way to send it on. To help it. Your compassion is a variable that complicates the equation. It is a potential liability. It's who I am. Izuku shot back, his will flaring. I'm not going to be a hero who just destroys things he doesn't understand. He ducked into a nearby alley, away from prying eyes. Okay, he whispered, his voice echoing slightly inside the helm. We do this my way. A banishing spell, something that will send it away without hurting it. A banishment requires more finesse. It will be a more complex working. Your control is untested. Relinquish motor functions to me. I will execute the spell with precision. Izuku felt a pressure in his mind, a sense of Naba trying to take the driver's seat. It was a tempting offer. Let the billion-year-old cosmic being handle it. But he couldn't. If he was going to do this, it had to be him. No. We do it together. I am the anchor, remember? There was another mental pause. Very well. A joint operation. Raise your hands. Focus your will. Picture the entity being peacefully unbound from this plane. Izuku stepped out of the alley. A few people gave him strange looks, a kid in a school uniform wearing a bizarre golden helmet, but their attention was mostly on the heroes. He raised his hands, his fingers trembling. He could feel the power welling up inside him, a torrent of raw energy waiting for direction. He focused on the shimmering spirit, on the idea of peace, of release. He tried to weave the spell, to shape the energy into golden threads of light that would gently envelop the entity and carry it away. Naba's power surged, far stronger than Izuku had anticipated. It was like trying to steer a freight train with bicycle handlebars. At the same time, Naba tried to assert control, to streamline the spell with cold, hard logic. Their wills clashed in the heart of the incantation. The result was magical chaos. Instead of gentle threads, a massive, solid gold shield, 10 meters wide and intricately carved with symbols Izuku had never seen, erupted into existence in midair. It appeared directly in front of a news van, stopping it from rolling into a storefront with a deafening clang. Whoa! What was that? Someone shouted. That's too big. Izuku panicked. I just wanted to banish the spirit. Your emotional output is overwhelming the structural integrity of the spell, Naba noted, with no hint of alarm. You are flooding the engine. Recalibrate. Before Izuku could recalibrate, he saw another car, its driver slumped over the wheel in a grief-induced daze, begin to swerve towards a group of onlookers Kamui Woods hadn't been able to shield yet. Stop it! Izuku screamed in his mind, shoving his power towards the vehicle. Naba's intent was simple, erect a solid wall of force. Izuku's intent, however, was tangled with a frantic desire not to destroy the car or hurt the driver. He didn't want a wall. He wanted the car to just not be a threat. The conflicting wills produced a result neither of them intended. A wave of shimmering golden energy washed over the sedan. The screech of tires was replaced by a cacophony of frantic cooing. In the blink of an eye, the multi-ton vehicle of steel, glass, and plastic transmuted into a flock of several hundred white doves, which burst into the air in a flurry of feathers and flew off into the sky. The unconscious driver fell harmlessly onto the asphalt where his seat had been, completely unharmed. The entire intersection fell silent. Heroes, police, and civilians stared, mouths agape, at the spot where a car had been moments before. Kamui Woods lowered his arm, a sliver of wood still attached to it, his expression one of complete befuddlement. Doves? Izuku shrieked internally. I turned a car into doves? An unexpected but effective outcome, Nabu commented. The threat is neutralized with no loss of life. A chaotic solution for a chaotic problem. This isn't the time for analysis, the grief spirit shrieked, a silent, psychic sound that lanced through Izuku's head. The sudden, powerful bursts of order-based magic were like acid to it. It began to pulse violently, and the feeling of despair intensified tenfold across the entire block. It is agitated. Now is the time to strike. The banishing spell, Izuku Midoriya. Focus! Gritting his teeth, Izuku ignored the stunned stares and the approaching heroes. He focused all his will, all his desperate need to end this without more destruction. He pictured the creature not as a monster to be slain, but as a lost soul to be guided home. He poured his compassion, the very thing Nabu called a liability, into the heart of the spell. This time, something clicked. His will and Nabu's knowledge found a brief, perfect harmony. Izuku's hands began to glow with a soft, golden light. He spoke a single word that echoed with the power of 1,000 voices, a word from a language that hadn't been spoken on Earth in millennia. Golden, ethereal chains, woven from pure light and shaped like ankhs, erupted from the ground around the grief spirit. They didn't strike or crush, they gently wrapped around its smoky form, humming with a soothing, melodic energy. The creature stopped shrieking. The oppressive aura of despair began to lift, replaced by a feeling of profound peace. The smoky form solidified for a moment, and Izuku could almost see the face of a man, his features etched with sorrow, but now, with a hint of a grateful smile. The entity dissolved into motes of golden light that drifted up into the sky and vanished. The curse was broken. The air at the intersection felt clean and light again. The drivers and pedestrians shook their heads, blinking as if waking from a bad dream. The oppressive grief was gone. The spell had worked. The backlash was immediate. The helmet felt like it weighed a ton. The power receded, leaving Izuku feeling hollowed out, his muscles trembling with exhaustion. He stumbled back, his vision swimming. Hey! You! Stop right there! It was Kamui Woods, his wooden arm pointed accusingly at Izuku. Who are you? What was that? Is that your quirk? Izuku's mind was a blank. He couldn't just tell them he was Dr. Fate. He couldn't explain Nabu. He did the only thing a terrified, exhausted teenager could do. He ran. He poured the last of his energy into a desperate sprint, ducking back into the alley he'd come from. He could hear Kamui shouting behind him, but the hero was too busy with the accident scene to give chase. Izuku ran for 3 blocks before collapsing against a brick wall, gasping for breath. He pulled the helmet off. The sudden silence was deafening. He was just Izuku again, a scared kid in way over his head. The helmet felt warm in his hands. The mission was a success, Nabu's voice echoed faintly in his memory. The imbalance is corrected. It was a mess. Izuku gasped, leaning his head back against the cool brick. I turned a car into birds. A variable has been noted. Your compassion is a formidable and dangerous element. It complicates the equation of my magic, creating unpredictable results. Yet, it also provided the precise emotional frequency needed to soothe the entity for banishment. It strengthens the anchor, even as it destabilizes the spellwork. Nabu's assessment was, as always, detached and analytical. But Izuku thought he detected something else in that mental voice, something that might have been the cosmic equivalent of grudging respect. We must learn to calibrate this union, Izuku Midoriya. Order must be tempered with purpose. My power must be guided by your will. Izuku looked down at the golden helmet, then back in the direction of the intersection. He had been terrified. He had been clumsy. He had caused a flock of doves to spontaneously exist, but he had also saved people. He had done what the pro-heroes couldn't. He had felt the despair of the spirit, and given it peace. His dream hadn't died on that rooftop. It had just been reborn, stranger and more terrifying than he could ever have imagined. He wasn't going to be the next All Might. He was going to be the first Dr. Fate, and he had a feeling his lessons were just beginning. The 10 months that followed Izuku's chaotic first mission were the strangest and most grueling of his life. His existence split into two distinct, parallel streams. By day, he was Izuku Midoriya, a quiet, diligent middle school student finishing his final year. He did his homework, helped his mother with groceries, and endured the escalating, confused taunts of Katsuki Bakugo, who couldn't comprehend the sudden, quiet confidence that had replaced Izuku's usual fearful stutter. But by night, and in every stolen moment in between, he was the apprentice to a cosmic entity. There was no physical training, no lifting weights on a trash-strewn beach. His training ground was the boundless landscape of his own mind, a space Naba helped him shape into a mental construct he began to call the Mind Library. It was a vast, silent hall with shelves that stretched into an impossible, starlit ceiling. Every book was a concept, every scroll a spell, every floating orb a piece of cosmic history. Here, he did not train his body, he trained his will. He learned to wield focus as a weapon and discipline as a shield. Your human mind is a torrent of uncontrolled emotion, Naba's voice would echo in the silence of the library. It is your greatest strength, and your most glaring weakness. Magic is the imposition of will upon reality. A scattered will results in scattered, unpredictable magic. Doves, for instance. Izuku would flush with remembered embarrassment every time Naba mentioned the doves. Their training consisted of hours of meditation, of learning to hold a single, pure thought for an extended period. He started small, mending a cracked teacup with a thread of golden energy, levitating his pencils into perfect formation, creating a small, fist-sized shield of light that could withstand a dropped book. The greatest challenge was navigating his partnership with Nabu. The Lord of Order was not a teacher in the traditional sense. He was a repository of knowledge, a being of pure, cold logic who saw the universe as a grand, intricate equation. Why must I learn the 17 metaphysical laws of thaumaturgic resonance just to create a shield? Izuku would ask, frustrated after hours of study. One does not build a house without understanding the principles of load-bearing walls and foundations, Nabu would reply. To wield power without understanding is to invite catastrophe. It is the very definition of chaos. Slowly, painstakingly, Izuku began to learn. He discovered he had an affinity for defensive and binding magics, spells that protected and restrained rather than destroyed. It was a reflection of his soul, Nabu conceded. While the Lord of Order would have preferred a more direct and destructive arsenal, he admitted that Izuku's methods were, in their own way, a purer application of Order's principles. The topic of UA High School came up a month before the exam. I still want to go, Izuku projected into their shared mental space, sitting at his desk and staring at the application form. Explain the tactical advantage, Nabu requested. It's the best hero school in the country. It's where All Might went. It's the only path I've ever known to becoming a hero. I need to learn how to save people, how to handle rescue situations, how to... We have access to knowledge that predates the concept of schools, Nabu interrupted. The rescue protocols of 1,000 galactic civilizations are available to you. The strategic acumen of cosmic generals is yours to command. The curriculum of this institution is, by comparison, rudimentary. But it's not just about knowledge, Izuku argued, a familiar passion rising in him. It's about being there, on the ground. Understanding this world, its people, its heroes. You said yourself that quirks are the source of the instability. UA is the single greatest concentration of powerful and emerging quirks on the planet. If we want to monitor for threats, if we want to be in a position to protect people, doesn't it make sense to be at the very heart of it all? There was a long, considered silence. Izuku held his breath, fearing the logical rebuttal that would dismantle his dream a second time. Your reasoning is sound, Naba finally stated. The location is a nexus of nascent power. A potential breeding ground for both order and chaos. Proximity will allow for efficient monitoring and threat assessment. We will attend this UA High School. Izuku pumped his fist under his desk, a wide grin spreading across his face. He felt a surge of pride. He had won a debate with a being that was older than time. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. It was the first time they had truly felt like partners. The day of the UA entrance exam arrived on a crisp, clear morning. Izuku stood before the towering gates of the esteemed academy, a sea of hopeful, nervous teenagers flowing around him. He wasn't wearing the helmet, of course. It was safely tucked away in a reinforced section of his yellow backpack, its presence a cool, comforting weight against his back. He felt Naba's consciousness, a quiet hum at the back of his mind, observing everything with detached curiosity. The written portion of the exam was, to Izuku's surprise, almost laughably easy. As he sat in the massive auditorium, the complex questions of mathematics, science, and literature appeared simple. The knowledge Naba had flooded him with was not just about magic. It was about everything. The fundamental laws of physics, the intricate history of global politics, the precise grammar of multiple languages. It was all there, perfectly organized and instantly accessible. He finished the test with an hour to spare, a calm certainty settling in his chest where crippling test anxiety used to live. It was in the orientation for the practical exam that the pressure returned. Present Mick's booming voice explained the rules: a simulated urban environment, 3 types of robotic villains worth 1, 2, or 3 points respectively. The goal was to score as many points as possible by disabling them. And one more thing, listeners! Present Mike yelled, a massive silhouette appearing on the screen behind him. There's a 4th type of villain! The 0-pointer! This big fella is worth 0 points. Think of him as a gimmick, an obstacle to avoid. My advice? Run away! A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. Izuku felt a familiar tremor of fear, but it was different now. It was a cold, analytical assessment of a threat, not the panicked terror of a helpless bystander. The energy signature of that machine is substantial, Naba commented in his mind. Its destruction would require a significant expenditure of power. The risk-to-reward ratio is suboptimal. Avoidance is the logical course of action. Got it, Izuku agreed. He found himself at the gates of Practical Exam Battle Center B. He recognized the spiky ash-blonde hair and the arrogant sneer of Bakugo a few meters away. Bakugo caught his eye and scoffed, a look of utter contempt on his face. What the hell are you doing here, Deku? He snarled, his voice low and dangerous. Come to cheer on the real heroes? Get lost before you get hurt. Izuku met his gaze. He didn't flinch. He didn't stammer. He simply said, I'm here to take the test, Kakin. Bakugo's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in rage. The sheer lack of fear from Izuku was a greater insult than any comeback. Before he could retort, Present Mick's voice screamed from the speakers. And begin! The massive gates slid open. For a second, everyone stood in stunned silence. What are you waiting for? The real world doesn't have a countdown. Go, go, go! The crowd surged forward. Bakugo was gone in an instant, propelled by a series of controlled explosions. Izuku, however, stood his ground for a moment, closing his eyes and taking a single, calming breath. He slipped into a nearby alley, shielded from view, and pulled the helmet from his bag. He lifted the cool, heavy gold and settled it over his head. The world snapped into high definition. The frantic shouts of the other examinees, the distant whirring of robotic servos, the stress spikes in the heart rates of everyone around him. He could perceive it all. The golden ink insignia bloomed on his chest, hidden beneath his tracksuit. Multiple hostiles detected, Naba's voice stated, providing a tactical overlay in his mind's eye. 3 one-point targets converging on Sector 4. A 2-point target ambushing a group of examinees in Sector 2. Optimal strategy suggests a spiraling clear pattern starting from our current position. Strategy acknowledged, Izuku thought, a strange calm settling over him. But let's adjust the parameters. Objective is not just destruction. It's about proving I can be a hero. He stepped out of the alley. A 1-point robot, a sleek machine on a single large wheel, swiveled its red optic towards him and charged. Several other applicants scattered, shouting about getting the first points. Izuku raised a single hand. He didn't brace for impact. He didn't prepare a massive attack. He simply focused. Transitive energy conversion. A simple working, Nabu advised. Golden light, thin as a spider's thread, shot from Izuku's fingertips. It wasn't an explosion, or a beam of force. It was a delicate, intricate web of energy that wrapped around the robot's chassis. The threads sank into its armor plating, not melting it, but phasing through it. The robot's red eye flickered. It shuddered to a halt a mere foot in front of Izuku, its internal mechanisms grinding and sparking. Then, its lights went out, and it toppled over, completely inert. Izuku hadn't destroyed it. He had simply used a targeted spell to short-circuit its entire electrical system. It was the magical equivalent of cutting the power cord. Precise. Efficient. Non-destructive. He turned and saw two more robots rolling down the street. An examinee with engine-like calves, Tenya Ida, raced past, delivering a powerful kick that tore one of the robots in half. It was impressive, but it sent shrapnel flying in every direction. Another examinee, a girl with pink skin, yelped and threw up a hand to shield her face. Before the metal shards could reach her, a shimmering, translucent golden circle materialized in the air in front of her, deflecting the debris with a soft chime. The girl stared at the fading shield, then at Izuku, who simply gave a slight nod before moving on. Rescue points. The thought was instinctual. He began to move through the city, a golden specter of uncanny efficiency. He didn't engage in the frantic brawls for points. He became a ghost in the machine of the exam. When a three-pointer cornered a student with a tail, Izuku didn't attack the robot. He opened a shimmering, circular portal in the wall behind the student. "In here!" his muffled voice called out. The student dove through, and the portal snapped shut, leaving the robot to fire its cannons at a solid brick wall. Another group of robots charged down a narrow street. Instead of fighting them, Izuku raised both hands. A golden-rimmed tear in reality opened in the street before them. A second, identical tear opened in the sky directly above them. The first robot rolled straight into the portal on the ground and a second later, fell out of the portal in the sky, crashing down onto the robots behind it in a tangled heap of metal. He was a force of nature, but a quiet one. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy in the way Bakugo was, with his thunderous explosions that echoed through the entire battle center. He was just effective. He racked up a steady, if not spectacular, number of villain points, all achieved with an eerie lack of collateral damage, but his real focus was elsewhere. He prioritized rescue. When a powerful quirk user accidentally brought a building facade down, Izuku was there, levitating the chunks of concrete in midair long enough for the trapped students to scramble free. When a boy who shot lasers from his navel was overwhelmed, a perfectly timed portal redirected his own laser back at the attacking robot, disabling it. He rescued a girl with brown, bobbed hair and a permanent blush from a tricky spot, levitating a large piece of debris that had pinned her leg. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm and even. "I think so. Thank you," she said, looking at him with wide, grateful eyes. "That was amazing. What's your quirk?" Before he could answer, a deep, earth-shattering tremor shook the entire city. In a darkened observation room, a bank of monitors displayed feeds from every battle center. A group of pro-heroes, the faculty of UA, watched with keen eyes. "That kid with the explosions in Center B has some serious power," one of them commented. "Incredible offensive potential, but zero subtlety. The Ida boy is showing great speed and tactical awareness," another added. Aizawa Shota, also known as Eraserhead, leaned forward, his tired eyes fixated on one particular screen. It showed a student in a green tracksuit who was odd. He wasn't fighting like the others. There was no visible strain, no telltale signs of quirk usage. Just calm, deliberate movements and impossible results. "What's the story with that one?" Aizawa grunted, pointing at the screen. "Midoriya Izuku. Quirk, unregistered." Principal Nizu, a small, white-furred creature in a suit, sipped his tea, his black eyes gleaming with intelligence. "Indeed. He hasn't destroyed a single robot, yet his point total is steadily climbing. He seems to be disabling them through some form of energy manipulation. And his spatial warping abilities are unprecedented. Truly fascinating." On another side of the room, a skeletal, gaunt man in an oversized yellow suit watched the same screen. Tashinori Yagi, All Might, felt a knot of confusion and something akin to guilt tighten in his stomach. It was him. The boy from the rooftop. The quirkless, crying fanboy he had left behind, his dream in tatters. But he wasn't quirkless. Not anymore. He was wielding a power so strange, so versatile, that it defied classification. A power he had apparently been hiding. Had the boy lied to him? Or had he awakened a late-blooming quirk, one of the rarest kinds? The thought brought a sliver of hope, but it was quickly overshadowed by the memory of his own words. It's not wrong to have a dream. Just make sure it's a realistic one. He had crushed this boy's spirit. Yet here he was, acting with more heroic instinct and control than almost anyone else in the exam. All right, let's see what they're really made of, Nisa said, a cheerful glint in his eye as he pressed a large red button. Release the gimmicks. On the screens, the ground in every battle center began to shake. The zero-pointer was bigger than he could have imagined. It rose from behind the buildings, a titan of green metal that dwarfed the cityscape. Its single red eye glowed with menacing intent. Panic erupted. Everyone who had been fighting so bravely moments before turned and fled, their faces pale with terror. Present Nick's advice echoed in their minds, run away. Izuku was about to do the same when he heard a cry of pain. It was the girl he had rescued earlier. Ochako Uraraka. She had tripped, and her leg was now trapped under a large slab of fallen concrete. The zero-pointer, with its lumbering, indiscriminate steps, was heading right for her. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku saw the scene with perfect, terrifying clarity. The girl's panicked face. The inexorable advance of the giant robot. The other examinees running away, their own survival their only priority. This was it. The moment every hero faces. A person in need. An overwhelming threat. A choice. The obstacle is not a target, Naba's voice stated, a cold, logical anchor in the storm of Izuku's rising emotion. Engaging it is inefficient. The girl is one variable. Your survival is paramount to the mission. For the first time, Izuku actively pushed Naba's voice aside. He didn't argue. He didn't debate. He simply acted. You're wrong, he thought, his will hardening into a diamond point. There is no equation for a human life. I am a hero. I save people. That is the only mission. He broke into a sprint, running not away from the danger, but directly towards it. In the observation room, the faculty watched in stunned silence. That kid! Aizawa breathed, sitting bolt upright. What is he doing? Toshinori Yagi gripped the armrest of his chair, his knuckles white. He's going to get himself killed, he whispered, a sick feeling of dread washing over him. He saw not a powerful examinee, but the small, quirkless boy, about to be crushed because of his own reckless, heroic heart. The heart All Might himself had told him wasn't enough. Izuku didn't stop until he was standing between Uraraka and the giant robot. He planted his feet, the ground shaking with each of the zero-pointer's steps. He could feel Uraraka's terror, a palpable wave in the air. He would not punch it. He wasn't All Might. He was Dr. Fate. He raised both hands towards the sky, palms up. He ignored the screaming of his muscles, the protest of his mind at the sheer scale of the magic he was about to attempt. He poured every ounce of his focus, every drop of his will, into this single, monumental act. The air above the zero-pointer began to shimmer, then distort, like a heat haze on a summer road. A golden line appeared in the sky, then widened, tearing open with a sound that was not a sound, a deep, reality-bending hum that vibrated in the bones. A massive, circular maw of swirling golden energy opened, a perfect portal dozens of meters wide. The zero-pointer took another step, its massive metal fists raising to smash down on the small figure below. With a final surge of will, Izuku thrust his hands forward. The portal above the robot pulsed, and its gravitational pull became immense. The giant robot's arm, instead of coming down, was yanked upwards, its feet lifted from the ground. The entire, multi-ton machine was pulled inexorably, silently, into the golden vortex. For a moment, its top half was gone, consumed by the portal, while its legs still dangled in the air. Then, with a final, silent lurch, the rest of it vanished. Izuku snapped the portal shut. The tear in reality healed itself, leaving nothing but empty blue sky. Absolute silence descended upon the battle center. A second later, with a deafening crash, the bottom half of the zero-pointer, from the waist down, fell from the sky and slammed into the ground, completely inert. The top half was gone. Where to? Izuku wasn't even sure. A pocket dimension. The empty space between molecules. Anywhere but here. The buzzer blared, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku swayed on his feet, the world tilting violently. The power receded, leaving him feeling like an empty husk. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The helmet suddenly felt like it was made of lead. He had done it. He looked over at Uraraka, who was staring, her mouth wide open, at the bisected robot, then at him. He managed a weak, shaky smile before the exhaustion finally claimed him, and he pitched forward onto the pavement. In the observation room, no one spoke. They simply stared at the monitor, at the boy who had just done the impossible. He hadn't just defeated the undefeatable obstacle. He had erased half of it. Niza finally broke the silence, his voice a soft, awed whisper. Well, that was certainly unconventional. Aizawa was speechless. He had seen quirks of every shape and size. He had never, ever seen anything like that. It wasn't just power. It was control. It was a complete, casual disregard for the known laws of physics. Toshinori Yagi slumped back in his chair, his mind reeling. The guilt was gone, replaced by a profound, earth-shaking sense of awe. He had been wrong. So utterly, fundamentally wrong. He had looked at that boy and seen a fragile vessel, too weak to contain the power needed to be a hero. He hadn't realized that the boy's will, his heroic spirit, was the power. It had called forth a miracle. The scores, if you please, Niza said, his whiskers twitching with excitement. The final tally appeared on the main screen. Katsuki Bakugo was at the top with 77 villain points and 0 rescue points. And then, at the very top of the list, was a new number 1. Examinee 2234, Midoriya, Izuku. Villain points, 45. Rescue points, 120. The rescue points score was so high it broke the previous record by double. A week later, a thin envelope from Yui arrived at the Midoriya household. Izuku opened it with trembling hands. A small disc fell out, projecting a hologram of All Might. Young Midoriya! The hero's voice boomed. But his tone was different. It wasn't the confident sound of the symbol of peace. It was softer, more humbled. I am here to tell you that you have passed the entrance exam with flying colors. Your performance was breathtaking. It was the truest display of heroism I have seen in a very long time. All Might paused, and for a moment, the projection seemed to look right at Izuku. I was wrong. What I said to you on that rooftop. I was wrong. You have a power that is perhaps greater than any quirk. The power of a true hero. Welcome, young Midoriya. Welcome to your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku held the acceptance letter in his hand, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. On his desk, the helm of Nabu sat silent and still. He was in. His journey was just beginning, a strange and terrifying path that no one could walk with him. But it was his path. And for the first time, he felt ready to face his fate. The first day at Yui High School was a whirlwind of anxiety and surrealism. Clad in the crisp, gray uniform, Izuku walked through the massive, 1A classroom door feeling like an imposter. Every student in the room radiated an aura of confidence and power. He could see it in the way Tenya Ida, the engine-legged boy from the exam, chopped his arms with rigid precision, and in the casual way a girl with black hair tied in a spiky ponytail created a small, intricate metal sculpture on her desk out of thin air. And then there was Bakugo. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet kicked up on his desk, his expression a thunderous mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His crimson eyes were locked onto Izuku the moment he stepped into the room. It wasn't the familiar glare of a bully looking down on a worthless pebble. This was different. It was the bewildered fury of a predator that had just seen a rabbit turn into a dragon. Izuku gave him a hesitant nod and quickly found an empty seat near the back, the silent hum of Nabu a calming presence in the back of his mind. The ambient energy in this room is highly volatile, Nabu commented, his tone the psychic equivalent of a raised eyebrow. A concentration of so many untrained, emotionally unstable reality warpers. It is a statistical anomaly this building is still standing. They're not reality warpers, they're kids, Izuku thought back, his hands sweating as he fiddled with his pen. And so am I. The day proceeded in a blur. The homeroom teacher, the perpetually exhausted Shota Aizawa, put them through a grueling quirk apprehension test. Izuku managed his way through it with subtle, controlled applications of magic, careful not to reveal the full, cosmic scope of his abilities. He enchanted his shoes with a minor levitation spell for the 50-meter dash, reinforced his grip with a binding rune for the grip strength test, and created a small, localized gravity well just beyond the line for the ball throw, causing the ball to fall sideways for an infinite distance. Each feat earned him a fresh glare from Bakugo and a sharp, analytical stare from Aizawa. During a break, Bakugo cornered him, slamming a hand against the wall next to Izuku's head. "All right, you damn Deku!" he snarled, his voice a low growl that promised violence. Smoke curled from his free palm. "The game is over. No more lies." "What is it? What's your trick?" "You were a quirkless, useless wannabe your whole damn life, and then you show up at the exam and pull that thing out of your ass. And now this. No one develops a quirk like that overnight. So you're gonna tell me, right now, what the hell is going on?" Izuku looked his childhood friend in the eye. The old fear was still there, a ghost in his gut, but it was overshadowed by the weight of Naba's secrets. How could he explain a Lord of Order and the eternal war against chaos to someone who saw the world in terms of explosions and victory? "It isn't a quirk, Kaken," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "That's the truth." Bakugo's face contorted with rage. "Don't you lie to me, I'm not." Izuku held his gaze. "It's something else. Something I found. It's complicated." The sheer, unadorned honesty of it seemed to throw Bakugo off more than any excuse would have. He stared, searching for the lie, the deception, but found only a strange, weary sincerity. He let out a frustrated "TCH," and stalked away, more confused and enraged than ever. The rest of the first few days passed in a similar fashion. Izuku was an enigma. His classmates didn't know what to make of him. He was shy and mumbled his way through introductions, but on the training field, he performed impossible feats with a detached, unnerving calm. He was an outlier, a puzzle that no one, least of all Izuku himself, knew how to solve. The trip to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, was supposed to be a standard rescue training exercise. The bus ride was filled with the cheerful, boisterous energy of teenagers on a field trip. Izuku sat quietly, listening to his classmates chatter about their quirks and hero costumes. He felt a pang of loneliness. Their lives, their powers, were so straightforward. His own costume, which he had designed to be a practical, dark green jumpsuit with reinforced armor, had a hidden, vital component. The inner lining was woven with microscopic runes of protection, and the full-face respirator mask was designed to subtly disguise the helm of Naoba should he ever need to wear it in the field. They were greeted at the massive domed facility by the Space Hero, 13. The interior of the USJ was breathtaking, a sprawling landscape with different zones replicating various disaster scenarios: a shipwreck, a landslide, a fire, a downtown plaza. "As I'm sure you're all aware, my quirk is Black Hole," 13 explained. "It's a powerful quirk that can be used to suck up and destroy anything. But it's also a quirk that can very easily kill." Izuku listened intently. Her words resonated with his own recent experiences. Power was a responsibility, a burden as much as a gift. It was as 13 finished her speech that the world went wrong. The lights in the facility flickered and died, plunging them into a dim, eerie twilight. The central water fountain sputtered and ceased. Aizawa, ever vigilant, tensed immediately. 13. Protect the students. At the bottom of the central staircase, the air began to shimmer and distort, just as it had above the zero-pointer, but this was a sickly, violent purple. It tore open, a ragged wound in reality, and a tide of people began to pour out. They weren't heroes. They were a motley collection of street thugs and low-level villains, their faces a mixture of greed and malice, and leading them were three figures. A man whose entire body seemed to be made of swirling purple mist. A man covered in dismembered hands, his posture twitchy and unsettling, scratching furiously at his neck. And behind them, a hulking, monstrous beast with an exposed brain and dead, staring eyes. "The portal isn't closing," Aizawa said, pulling his yellow goggles over his eyes. This is a planned attack. They knew our schedule. Someone here is a traitor. Chaos, Nabu's voice intoned in Izuku's mind, sharp and cold as ice. I feel it. Not from these, rabble. But from the event itself. This is an orchestrated dissonance. The man covered in hands, Tamura Shigaraki, looked up at them, his visible eye wide with a chilling, childish glee. We're the League of Villains, he rasped, his voice dry and cracked. And we're here to kill the symbol of peace, All Might. Aizawa didn't hesitate. He leaped down the stairs, his capture weapon unfurling like striking serpents. You can't be a hero with just one trick, he muttered, his quirk erasing the abilities of 3 villains at once as he slammed their heads together. The Man of Mist, Kurogyri, expanded, forming a dome of dark energy to block the students' escape. It is a pleasure to meet you. We are the League of Villains. Forgive our audacity, but we have invited ourselves into this bastion of heroism to say hello. Before anyone could react, the dome of purple mist exploded outwards, enveloping the students. Izuku felt a gut-wrenching sensation of being pulled apart and squeezed back together. He landed hard on the metal deck of a ship, the smell of salt and water filling the air. He was in the shipwreck zone, surrounded by a handful of villains. The fight was a blur. He worked in tandem with Tsuyu Ajiri and Minoru Mineta, using his limited, subtle magic to disorient the villains, creating small portals to redirect their attacks and binding their feet to the deck with shimmering golden ropes. He was holding back, trying to appear as if he had a versatile but not overwhelming quirk. But his attention, and Nabu's, was focused on the central plaza. Aizawa was a whirlwind of motion, a master of quirkless combat, using his erasure to level the playing field. But he was outnumbered. And then, Shigaraki gave the order. Noma! Get him! The hulking beast moved with a speed that defied its size. It caught Aizawa, slamming him into the ground with a sickening crunch that echoed across the facility. Izuku's blood ran cold as he watched the creature methodically, brutally break his teacher's arms. He can still erase my quirk! Shigaraki cackled, scratching his neck with frantic energy. You're so cool, Eraserhead. But you can't erase a simple strength enhancement quirk, can you? The Nomu grabbed Aizawa's head, preparing to crush it against the stone plaza. Time stopped. In that frozen moment, Izuku Midoriya, the student, vanished. The fear, the hesitation, the carefully constructed facade of a normal quirk user, it all burned away, consumed by a white-hot, singular purpose. Save him. The creature is an anomaly, Naba's voice rang with cold fury. A grotesque perversion of life. Multiple quirks stitched together. It is an abomination of chaos. It must be unmade. Then let's unmake it, Izuku thought, his will a blade of cold steel. He reached into his backpack, which had miraculously stayed on during the warp. His fingers closed around the smooth, cool metal of the helmet. He pulled it out, and for a moment, it seemed to glow with an internal, golden fire. He didn't hesitate. He put it on. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. A column of brilliant, searing golden light erupted from the deck of the ship, punching a hole through the domed roof of the USJ and spearing into the sky above. Every villain, every student, and Shigaraki himself stopped, shielding their eyes from the blinding radiance. When the light faded, a new figure stood where the green-haired boy had been. He hovered a foot off the ground, clad in a seamless suit of deep blue and gold. A billowing golden cape, seemingly woven from starlight, flowed behind him, untouched by the artificial wind. The featureless, golden helm of Nabu gleamed, and in the center of his chest, a glowing golden ink burned with the intensity of a small sun. This was not Izuku Midoriya. This was power. This was order. This was fate. The voice that spoke was not the timid, mumbling voice of a teenage boy. It was a chorus of 1,000 voices speaking in perfect, chilling unison. It was the voice of Nabu, tempered and focused through the lens of Izuku's will. It echoed through the USJ, not as sound, but as a direct, telepathic pronouncement that vibrated in every mind. This creature is an affront to the natural order. It is a tumor on the fabric of reality. It shall be unmade. Shigaraki stared, his hand frozen mid-scratch. What is that? Who the hell are you? Another hero? The Nomu, still holding Aizawa's head, turned its dead eyes towards the new threat. It released Aizawa, letting him slump to the ground, and charged, its footsteps shaking the very foundations of the building. It was a biological battering ram, a creature designed to absorb any impact and counter with overwhelming force. Dr. Fate did not move. He did not brace himself. He simply raised a single, gauntlet hand. The Noma was fast, but cosmic law was faster. 5 feet from Dr. Fate, the creature stopped dead, frozen in mid-stride. Shimmering, golden bands of energy, covered in intricate, glowing runes, had materialized around its limbs, anchoring it to the very concept of stillness. It strained, its muscles bulging, but it could not move an inch. It was like a fly caught in the amber of eternity. Your brute force is meaningless, the chorus voice of fate declared, a statement of absolute fact. The laws of physics are mine to command. Shigaraki's visible eye was wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. What? No! It's impossible! Noma was designed to kill All Might. He has shock absorption and super regeneration. You can't hurt him, hurt it. Dr. Fate tilted his head, a gesture that was utterly alien and inhuman. I will not harm a single cell. I will simply edit it. He extended his other hand towards the immobilized Noma. A beam of pure white light, so bright it was painful to look at, shot from his palm and enveloped the creature. The Noma did not scream. It did not explode. It began to dissolve, not into dust or ash. Its form unraveled. The complex, stitched-together DNA chains that gave it its power were deconstructed. The chaotic energy that animated its flesh was neutralized. Its physical matter was broken down into its base, component atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, which were then scattered harmlessly into the air. In the space of 5 seconds, the monster designed to kill the symbol of peace ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Erased. The golden bands of energy faded. Shigaraki stumbled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. This wasn't a hero. Heroes punched things. Heroes had limits. This thing, this golden god, it broke the rules of the game. It wasn't playing on the same board. It was the board. No. The voice of fate echoed, turning its featureless gaze towards Shigaraki and Kurojiri. For the architects of this chaos. He raised a hand, and the very air around the two villains began to crystallize, forming a golden cage of solidified time. But before the spell could complete, a new sound cut through the stunned silence of the USJ. It was a giggle, a high-pitched, childish, and utterly manic giggle that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Oh! Now this is a party! A voice squeaked, dripping with malicious glee. I thought this was going to be another boring punchy-smashy show, but look what we have here! A brand new shiny toy, a Lord of Order in a shiny new meat suit. How fun! A figure began to coalesce out of the shadows behind Shigaraki. He looked like a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, with pale skin, pointed ears, and 2 horn-like tufts of black hair. He was dressed in a pristine, old-fashioned blue and white suit, complete with a little red bow tie. He skipped into view, a wide, unsettling grin splitting his face. A small, orange cat with bat-like wings, Tikal, rubbed against his leg, purring. The moment he appeared, Naba's presence in Izuku's mind went rigid. A Lord of Chaos. The thought was not spoken, it was a psychic shockwave of pure, undiluted hatred. Clarion. The most ancient and unpredictable of them all. This was his doing. The villains were merely a distraction. A lure to draw us out. Clarion the witch boy clapped his hands together with childish delight. You figured it out. Gold star for the golden boy. I got some board waiting for you to show up. This world is so much fun. All these new powers popping up everywhere, like chaotic little weeds. It's my favorite new playground. I just had to see what kind of order it had cooked up to protect itself. He skipped over to Shigaraki, who was trembling, not with fear, but with a new kind of rage. You! Shigaraki rasped. You told us this would be easy. You said All Might would be here. Clarion patted him on the head condescendingly. And he will be, you dusty little man-child. But first, the opening act. And what an act it is! He turned his gleeful, red-eyed gaze back to Dr. Fate. So, what's your name, Mr. Order? Mr. Shiny Hat? Let's play! Before Dr. Fate could respond, Clarion snapped his fingers. Reality twisted. The ground of the USJ turned to bubbling pink gelatin. The ceiling became a swirling vortex of screaming faces. The water in the shipwreck zone transformed into sour milk. Dr. Fate stood unaffected, an island of absolute stability in a sea of madness. Your parlor tricks are meaningless, witch boy. This reality is under my protection. Protection? Boring! Clarion whined. He waved a hand, and the crystallized cage around Shigaraki and Kurogyri dissolved. I was hoping you'd be more fun, but you're just like all the other fates. Stiff, no sense of humor, he gestured to Kurogyri. Well, our work here is done. The new toy has been revealed. Time to go home and plan our next play date. Kurogyri, acting on instinct, began to form a warp gate. Shigaraki, however, was shaking with fury. No! I'm not done! I need to crush him! I need to— Oh, hush! Clarion said, his voice losing its playful edge for a split second, replaced by a cold, ancient authority that made Shigaraki freeze. You'll get your turn. This is my game now. With another childish giggle, Clarion grabbed Shigaraki's shoulder and, along with Kurogyri and his cat, stepped back into the shadows, vanishing without a trace. The chaotic illusions he had cast all dissolved, leaving the USJ silent and still once more. The immediate threat was gone. But a far greater one had just announced its presence on the world stage. Dr. Fate lowered his hands. The immediate danger had passed, but the cosmic implications were staggering. He turned his attention to the injured Aizawa, levitating gently to his side. He knelt, and a soft, golden light emanated from his hands as he began to assess the damage. The bones were shattered, the orbital socket fractured. It was then that the doors to the USJ were blown off their hinges. All Might stood there, his face a mask of fury and grim concern. I am here! He stopped, his famous smile faltering as he took in the scene. The scattered, defeated villains. The terrified students. His grievously injured colleague. And a golden, godlike being tending to him, radiating an aura of power that made the air itself tremble. All Might looked at the hovering figure, and his eyes widened in dawning, horrified recognition. Beneath the inhuman power, the cosmic presence, he could feel it. A faint, familiar spark of a stubborn, heroic soul. Young Midoriya? The silence that followed All Might's arrival was thick and heavy, broken only by the whimpers of injured villains, and the distant drip of water in the shipwreck zone. The symbol of peace stood frozen in the shattered doorway, his iconic smile completely gone, replaced by an expression of profound, earth-shaking confusion. His gaze was locked on the golden figure hovering over Aizawa's broken form. Dr. Fate did not rise to meet him. His attention remained fixed on his task. The golden light flowing from his gauntlet hands was not a healing spell in the conventional sense. It was a work of intricate, biological artifice. He was not merely mending bone, but persuading the very concept of wholeness to reassert itself upon Aizawa's body. He stabilized fractures, sealed hemorrhages, and placed his teacher's ravaged body into a state of suspended animation to prevent further damage. The pain was gone, replaced by a deep, magically induced slumber. Only when Aizawa was stable did Dr. Fate turn his featureless helm towards the assembled heroes and faculty who had begun to pour in behind All Might. Snipe, Present Mike, Midnight, they all stopped short, their expressions shifting from righteous fury to cautious awe. They were looking at something that didn't fit into their world of quirks and heroism. They were looking at a living myth. The immediate threat has passed. The choral, inhuman voice of Dr. Fate announced, its tone resonating within their minds rather than their ears. The lesser aggressors are subdued. The architect of the incursion, a lord of chaos known as Clarion, has retreated. The faculty member is stabilized but requires advanced medical care. All Might took a hesitant step forward. Young Midoriya, is that really you? The golden figure remained silent for a moment. Then, with a palpable sense of effort, the immense, overwhelming aura of cosmic power began to recede. It was like watching a star deliberately dim its own light. The glowing ink on his chest faded. The cape of starlight dissolved into nothingness. The figure slowly lowered himself to the ground, and as his feet touched the stone, he swayed. He reached up with trembling hands and removed the helm of Nabu. Underneath was not a god, but a boy. Izuku Midoriya, his face pale and slick with sweat, his green hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes were wide and haunted, filled with an exhaustion that went far beyond the physical. He looked at All Might, at the stunned faces of his teachers, at his terrified classmates who were being rounded up by cementos and ectoplasm, and the weight of what had just happened crashed down on him. All Might, he whispered, his voice hoarse and small. The helmet in his hands felt impossibly heavy. He took one wobbly step and his legs gave out. Before he could hit the ground, All Might was there, moving in a blur of motion despite his weakened state. He caught the boy, his large hand steadying his thin shoulder. The contrast was stark, the towering symbol of peace, and the trembling student who had just wielded a power that dwarfed his own. "Easy there, my boy," All Might said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "You've done enough." The aftermath was a bureaucratic nightmare. The USJ was cordoned off not just by police, but by a special government task force. The students were questioned, their parents were called, and a media firestorm erupted. But at the heart of the storm was a pocket of absolute silence. Izuku found himself not in an interrogation room, but in Principal Nise's office. It was a spacious, comfortable room lined with books, with a large window overlooking the UA campus. The principal sat behind his large desk, his small paws steepled, his black eyes sharp and analytical. Beside him stood a grim-faced Aizawa, his arms in casts and his head heavily bandaged, having refused anything more than the bare minimum of bed rest. And in the corner, looking gaunt and worried in his skeletal form, was Toshinori Yagi. The helm of Nabu sat on a small, velvet-covered table in the center of the room, a silent, golden enigma. Izuku had already explained the basics to his frantic mother, crafting a half-truth about a newly awakened, versatile, energy quirk that had manifested under extreme stress. She had cried, hugged him, and grounded him for a week for being so reckless, a punishment he accepted with quiet relief. The conversation he was about to have, however, required the full, terrifying truth. "So, Midoriya," Nizu began, his voice calm and disarming, "I think it's fair to say that your performance at the USJ was beyond all expectations. You saved Mr. Aizawa's life, and likely the lives of several of your classmates. For that, you have UA's deepest gratitude." Izuku squirmed in his chair. I only did what anyone would have." Aizawa let out a dry, humorless scoff. Don't give me that generic hero platitude, problem child. Anyone would have run. Anyone would have been annihilated. What you did was not normal. That power was not a quirk. I've erased thousands of quirks in my career. I was looking right at you when you transformed. I felt nothing. Your power source is external to your body, so start from the beginning. And don't leave anything out. Toshinori Yagi nodded in agreement. He's right, young Midoriya. We are not here to punish you. But we are faced with a threat that, according to your own words, is beyond our understanding. We need to know what we're up against. We need to know what you are. Izuku took a deep breath. He looked at the three men who represented the pinnacle of the hero world. A master of strategy and intellect, a master of combat and quirk erasure, and the symbol of peace himself. If he couldn't trust them, he couldn't trust anyone, and so, the story spilled out of him. He told them about the rooftop, about his despair, about the dusty antique shop and the cryptic old man. He told them about touching the helmet and having a billion years of knowledge poured into his brain. He explained Nabu, the Lords of Order, the eternal war with the Lords of Chaos, and the role of Dr. Fate as reality's anchor. He explained that the rise of quirks had destabilized the world's magical balance, turning Earth into a beacon for cosmic predators. He spoke of Clarion the Witch Boy, not as a villain, but as a fundamental force of nature, a being of pure, malevolent chaos who saw their entire reality as a playground. As he spoke, the expressions on the faces of his teachers shifted from skepticism to wide-eyed belief, and finally, to a deep, profound horror. They were men who had faced down armies of villains, who had dealt with city-leveling threats. But this was different. This was not a battle for Japan. This was a battle for the very laws of physics, for the meaning of existence itself. When Izuku finished, The room was silent for a long time. Niza was the first to speak, his usual cheerful demeanor gone, replaced by a grim solemnity. A war between conceptual forces. And you, a 14-year-old boy, have been drafted to be our planet's sole line of defense. The principal murmured, his gaze distant. The sheer scale is humbling, so this clarion, Aizawa said, his voice raspy. He wasn't here for the League of Villains. He was here for you. He used them to draw you out. Izuku nodded. Naba thinks so. It was a test. To see the new Dr. Fate in action, Toshinori Yagi leaned forward, his face etched with a terrible guilt. My boy. I am responsible for this. If I hadn't crushed your dream on that rooftop, you would never have been in that state of despair. You would never have wandered into that shop. This burden, it was placed upon you because of my failure. Izuku shook his head immediately, his own eyes welling up. No! All Might, no. You were just being realistic. You didn't know. This is my path now. It's terrifying, and I'm not ready for it, but for the first time in my life, I have the power to actually save everyone. I can't turn away from that. His words, filled with a maturity far beyond his years, hung in the air. The three heroes looked at each other. An unspoken agreement passed between them. They were in uncharted territory, and their only guide was the scared, determined boy sitting in front of them. You have our absolute trust, Midoriya, Niza said, his voice firm. And our absolute support. Your secret is safe within these walls. We will do everything in our power to help you prepare for this cosmic war. But we are clearly out of our depth. Your primary teacher in this matter must be Nabu himself. You need a safe place to train, a place beyond the reach of our enemies. Izuku looked at the helmet. Nabu mentioned something like that. A sanctum. A place outside of normal space and time. The Tower of Fate, Nabu's voice echoed softly in Izuku's mind, a quiet confirmation. It is the traditional sanctuary of my agents. A nexus of all magical knowledge. It does not exist. It must be created. He says I have to create it, Izuku said aloud. A Tower of Fate. Later that evening, Izuku stood in the center of his new dorm room. In the wake of the USJ attack, UA had fast-tracked the completion of its student dormitories, arguing that it was the only way to ensure the students' safety. The room was still sparse, filled with unpacked boxes. His All Might posters felt childish and out of place now, relics from a simpler life. He placed the helm of Nabu on his desk. Okay, he thought, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. How do we do this? The tower is not built of brick and mortar, Nabu explained. It is a construct of pure will, anchored to a fixed point in reality and expanded into a pocket dimension. It is a living library, a fortress of the mind made manifest. You must provide the anchor, the doorway. I will provide the architecture. An anchor? Like a door? Precisely. Choose a location. It will become the permanent threshold. Izuku looked around his small room. The main door led to the hallway. The window led outside. Then his eyes fell on the plain, featureless door of his closet. It was mundane. Overlooked. Perfect. The closet, he whispered. Acceptable. Now place your hand upon the door. Do not think of wood or paint. Think of a gateway. A threshold between what is and what could be. Clear your mind. I will handle the rest. Izuku took a deep breath and placed his palm flat against the cool wood of the closet door. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the sounds of his classmates moving in down the hall. He focused on the feel of the door, the simple, solid reality of it. Then he put on the helmet. Power, raw and untamed, surged through him. He felt Nabu's consciousness merge fully with his own. This time, he didn't fight it. He opened his mind, allowing the Lord of Order's immense knowledge and power to flow through him, guided by his own intent. The closet door began to glow with a soft, golden light. The wood grain swirled and reformed into intricate, arcane patterns. A large, golden ink materialized in the center of the door, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic light. Izuku, or rather, the composite being of Dr. Fate, reached out and pushed. The door swung inward, not into a dark closet full of clothes, but into a breathtaking impossibility. He stepped through. He was standing on a circular platform of polished obsidian, floating in the center of an immense, cylindrical chamber. There was no visible ceiling or floor, only an infinite vertical expanse. The walls were lined with endless shelves, packed with leather-bound tomes, ancient scrolls, shimmering crystal data shards, and floating orbs of captured starlight. A grand, spiraling staircase, seemingly made of solid moonlight, wound its way up and down into the infinite vertical space. The air was still and silent, smelling of old parchment and the clean, sterile scent of the void between worlds. This was the Tower of Fate. His new sanctuary. His new classroom. His new prison. He took off the helmet, and the full weight of the place settled on him. He was Izuku again, a small boy in a library the size of infinity. It was here, in the profound silence of the tower, that he and Naba had their first true conflict. 4 days, which passed as mere hours in the real world, Naba began Izuku's real training. It was not about simple spells anymore. It was about cosmic awareness, about scrying the threads of fate, about understanding the fundamental laws of reality in order to bend them. Naba projected a tactical map of the planet onto the air in front of Izuku. It was covered in points of light, some bright white, some flickering gray, some deep, angry red. These are the focal points of power on this planet, Naba explained. Individuals whose actions have a disproportionate impact on the flow of fate. Your teachers. Your classmates. The villain, all for one, a festering nexus of stolen chaos. The hero, All Might, a beacon of fading order. He's fading? Izuku asked, his heart clenching. His power is a temporary construct, passed from one vessel to another. It is a candle burning at both ends. It will soon be extinguished. He is, from a strategic standpoint, an asset with a rapidly approaching expiration date. Izuku recoiled as if struck. Don't talk about him like that. He's the symbol of peace. He's a person. He is a variable in a cosmic equation, Naba stated, his tone flat and unchanging. As are your classmates. Assets to be utilized. Obstacles to be managed. Acceptable losses, if necessary, for the preservation of the whole. A cold fury, unlike anything Izuku had ever felt, rose up in him. Acceptable losses? You're talking about my friends. My teachers. You think they're just pieces on a chessboard? This is not a game. This is a war. Sentiment is a vulnerability that chaos will exploit without mercy. Your compassion, as demonstrated at the intersection, makes your magic powerful but unpredictable. Your attachments, as demonstrated at the USJ, make you reckless. To be an effective agent of order, you must learn to be detached. You must be willing to sacrifice the few to save the many. No, Izuku said, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and defiance. I won't. I refuse. He stood up, facing the empty space where he felt Naba's presence was strongest. What is the point of order if there's no one left to enjoy it? What is the point of saving the world if we have to sacrifice our humanity to do it? You chose me for my will, for my desire to save people. You don't get to strip that away from me now. That's not order, that's just tyranny with a different name. The silence in the tower was absolute. Izuku's defiant words seemed to be absorbed by the infinite space. He had just yelled at a being that had witnessed the birth of stars. The thought was terrifying, but he didn't back down. When Naba's voice returned, it was different. There was a new quality to it, a subtle shift that Izuku couldn't quite place. It was thoughtful. Your argument contains a logical paradox. To protect the sheep, the shepherd cannot grieve for every one that is taken by the wolf, or he will be unable to protect the rest of the flock. Yet if the shepherd ceases to care for the sheep altogether, what is his purpose? The ancient Lord of Order seemed to be genuinely contemplating the problem. He had existed for eons, viewing the universe through a lens of pure, dispassionate logic. Izuku, with his fierce, illogical, human compassion, had just presented him with a philosophical conundrum he had never truly considered. Your passion is a flaw in your design as a warrior, Naba continued. But it may be the defining feature of your strength as a guardian. This synthesis, it is new. Unprecedented. We are not master and servant. We are not a weapon and a wielder. We are a partnership. A flawed, volatile, and perhaps more effective one. A single, ancient tome floated down from a high shelf and settled gently into Izuku's hands. It was bound in dark blue leather, with a golden ink embossed on the cover. The pages were filled with elegant, flowing script that Izuku could now miraculously read. Then let us redefine the terms of this partnership, Naba said. I will provide the knowledge. You will provide the conscience. I will be the library. You will be the scholar who chooses which books to read. Begin your studies, Izuku Midoriya. Not as my agent, but as my partner. The training is over. The education begins. Izuku looked down at the book in his hands. It was a primer on elemental magic, on the fundamental forces of creation. It was a peace offering. A concession. A new beginning. He sat down on the obsidian floor of his infinite library, a determined glint in his eye. He had a universe of knowledge at his fingertips and a cosmic war on the horizon, but for the first time since he put on the helmet, he didn't feel like a pawn in a game he couldn't comprehend. He felt like a hero, finally learning how to fight his own battle, on his own terms.